In this part of the program, we review global initiatives against terrorism in Africa, as well as strategic commodities on the continent. The United Nations Regional Office for Central Africa is developing a regional strategy to counter the Lord's Resistance Army and coordinate action in the affected countries. From our studios in Libreville in Gabon, we spoke to Abu Musa, Secretary General Special Representative for Central Africa. Mr. Musa will be tabling the strategy before the UN Security Council later this month.
What is happening right now is simply the fact that we have now going to introduce the second report of the United Nations Mission for Central Africa on the 27th of June before the Security Council. And this report talks about, the first part talks about the economic development in the last 6 months, talk about security, particularly the preventive actions and politics that we are making to make sure that the sub-region is able to move on. You cannot talk about economic development without making sure there is a stability in the sub-region.
Well, let's talk about some of those preventative measures. What are some of them?
Some of those, first is that this office in the last 6 months have been able to, as a secretariat of the United Nations Committee for Preventive Action on Security for the Central African region, have organized 2 meetings bringing ministers of defense of the sub-region together to exchange ideas and what's going on among themselves. But beyond that is what we have been doing together with the African Union to support the Union in their urge to see an end to the atrocities of Kony and his group.
But what are they? Because we keep on hearing about these meetings and discussions. What is being done right now, just in terms of action? Because this group has been going on for a really long time. So what is being done right now on the ground?
Indeed, it's been going on for a long time, but the new dimension to the solution seeking is that in the last 6 months we'll be able to galvanize the support and the interest of the affected countries, the 4 countries, that is the DRC, the Central African Republic, Uganda, as well as the South Sudan, to make sure that they are committed to the search for solution. That's one. Second, to make sure that with the support of the 100 American military advisors, to be able to provide tangible information on the whereabouts of Kony, so as to put an end to the atrocities. And obviously we need to also continue to support to take action on the humanitarian dimension of the crisis, that is providing food and assistance to the displaced persons. We are talking about 400,000 people that have been displaced or that have become refugees as a result of all this. So these are some of the concrete issues that are happening. But the issue is not only to arrest Kony, but we need also to look beyond arresting Kony, but as well making sure that the governments are able to return to areas that have been devastated with the activities of Kony and his group.
Farmers and their representatives meeting at the International Tobacco Growers Association Africa Region meeting voiced their objections to the proposals that they stop growing tobacco. Chairman Francois van der Merwe of the International Tobacco Growers Association for the Africa Region explained the extent of the conflict.
We support the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control's objectives of reducing tobacco consumption globally. And we as the sector agree with that. It's about how. And now they're going into the soft underbelly of the value chain, going into farmers, and want to forcefully remove them and prevent them from growing tobacco by doing a few things, by preventing government programs and policies that support tobacco growing, by preventing industry programs which support tobacco growing, by limiting the times in which tobacco farmers can plant tobacco, by limiting the area under which tobacco can be grown forcefully and later reducing that area, and by asking governments all over the world to reduce tobacco production at the same time.
But at the end of the day, I think what they're saying in all of this is they would like to stop the growth of tobacco.
Yes, that's certainly what they want, and that's certainly what we don't want, and we have great support all around the world and in Africa, and I carry the mandate for the whole of Africa that we will not tolerate this. And as I said, the second point is, yes, they want to forcefully get tobacco farmers out of tobacco production, but it's about the how. How can you regulate and intrude in farmers' decision-making processes, which are businessmen and should be respected as such, to try and prescribe to them what they should grow, how they should grow it, and what commodities they should grow without consulting the very sector that they want to regulate?
I went to the site and I was looking at some of the principles and some of the guidelines that they've given, and it seems to be, I mean, I haven't spoken to them, but just from the tone of reading some of what is in the way that they prescribe it, there seems to almost be a mistrust for the tobacco industry. Do you get that sense as well?
We absolutely get that sense, and you are spot on. You are 100% correct. You know, we live in a democratic society, we live in an open society, we live in a modern society where governments claim to be transparent and to consult when they make regulation. And the United Nations, which is a very respected body, and the World Health Organization is an agency, somehow they've lost that when it comes to tobacco. So when it comes to tobacco regulation, regulation is made in an exclusionary manner. And that cannot work. It's not sustainable. And the objectives of the FCTC will not be met if that is the way they want to drive guidelines all over the world.
One of the things that they have said, and I'm quoting this, tobacco's interference with health policies. And so this is, they're saying that what the tobacco industry wants, and just in terms of what health is, it's a complete, it's so contradictory that how do you even talk about it? Because what the tobacco industry wants is for people to smoke. And they're saying that's not healthy. Where does the middle ground even come when that is the case?
The tobacco sector, including tobacco farmers, acknowledge that the product we make and manufacture and grow comes with health risks. And therefore, our advice to people is that the best thing to do is not to use tobacco products. But regardless of that, it's still a choice to be made for people over the age of 18.
Isn't that a little bit understated, though, to say it's a health risk? Just, you know, I mean, isn't it a massive health risk for people to smoke?
Tobacco products cause harm to people's health, like many other lifestyle choices do that people do every day. However, we support that. But what we do say is if you want to reduce consumption all over the world, you do that in the spirit of consultation by involving the sector. And why has this happened with tobacco farmers? Because over the past 10, 12 years, the FCTC has been driving extreme regulation all over the world, and they have seen the result is that tobacco consumption is not declining on a global basis. It's very stable.
But also I would like to, I mean, one of the things, I don't know if this would play into it, but then we've got the issue of illegal cigarettes. Does that come into it at all?
Illegal cigarettes is a massive problem. And illegal cigarettes is driven by a couple of factors, and one of the factors is extreme regulation. If you drive extreme regulation and you drive extreme taxation, you create the opportunity for a black market. And because tobacco consumption over the world is very stable, now the FCTC is getting panicky and they are frustrated. And now what they decided is to go to down the supply chain to farmers and say, well, okay, let's go and get farmers forcefully out of tobacco production, because then we cut off the supply. And if there's no tobacco leaf, then tobacco products can't be made, because tobacco products are made from tobacco coming from the farms.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the employment. When you're talking about the African continent, you've got a country like Zimbabwe, you've got a country like Mali, a country like Malawi, for instance, and even a country like Zambia, where you do have tobacco farming in those countries, and just in terms of how labor intensive it is and how many people that it employs. What would the impact be for the African continent were it to be that, for instance, they do say no more tobacco, can't grow it anymore? What then?
The impact would be massive, and it would be disastrous, and there will still be no reduction in consumption. There's no link between tobacco production and the prevalence of smoking. So if you take tobacco farmers out of Africa, all the smokers will still be around. As long as there's a demand for tobacco products, the tobacco will be grown. So if you force tobacco farmers in Africa out of farming, the production will be taken up elsewhere, and those countries will get the benefit of the economic development that tobacco brings. If you look in Africa, more than 500 million kilograms of tobacco produced, by millions of people. If you take Tanzania, 90,000 farmers, Zambia, 27,000 farmers, Mozambique, 100,000 farmers. In Malawi, 7 out of 10 people in the economy are either directly or indirectly employed by tobacco. In Kenya, 30,000 farmers. And this excludes their dependents and the laborers. So it will have a massive impact. I'm firmly of the belief that these measures will fail, but it will cause disruption and people lose their livelihoods. We must remember that tobacco in Africa is grown in deep rural areas where other jobs are hard to find. And if we get these farmers and force them out and disrupt them, what will the FCTC then face up to the farmers and say, okay, you've stopped tobacco farming, there are no alternatives. How do we now ensure that you put food on the plates?
Africa has considerable mineral deposits, including uranium. Nicholas Danwa, political analyst at the South African Institute of International Affairs, explained the strategic significance of uranium.
There is a global rise in demand for energy and electricity, and Africa's uranium is a lot more accessible than other uranium mines in the rest of the world. So in that respect, it is gathering a lot of interest from the corporate world and from investors generally.
So we've got a lot of, there's a lot of prospect then for African uranium production, but of course uranium is an emotive commodity as well and can be open to abuse. Are we controlling it well enough in Africa, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think it is really mainly up to the industry at the moment. The industry is the only part of the uranium mining sector that has the capacity to improve the sustainability of mining. In my opinion, there needs to be global consultative processes on by the government and by civil society to set the perimeter within which mining companies in the uranium sector should operate. Because
of its strategic and, as I said, emotive nature of the commodity, is it government that needs to get involved? Is it a corporate governance issue, or do both have to come together in order to control this production and where the uranium goes, for example?
I don't see any reason for any part of this process to be excluded. I think that industry should definitely participate in a consultative process, but yes, in terms of governance, I say that governments should initiate the processes to set a perimeter within which uranium mining should take place in African countries.
Yes, exactly, and where the uranium goes, of course. I mean, I'm sure there, in the darker days of African development and mining development, I would have thought that it might have been open to abuse. Presumably that has stopped now.
I wouldn't say so. There is still some artisanal uranium mining happening, and I don't think that African governments really have the capacity to control this, and this is something that international organizations should definitely look into.
From a South African point of view, uranium has in the past, I think anyway, and correct me if I'm wrong, almost been a byproduct of things like the gold mining industry, but has that changed now? Are people targeting single mines, and can it be mined singly?
It can't in South Africa. South African uranium is a byproduct of gold and copper mining. It's in the same rock, and it will stay this way. But it doesn't mean we don't have very large reserves.
In a global context, what are our reserves like?
It depends at which price you look at the uranium reserves, but I would say between 4 and 5% of global reserves. That's quite a lot of uranium.
Yeah, okay. So that's it's an important byproduct. I mean, with the difficulties in the platinum and particularly in the gold mining industry in South Africa, obviously becoming very important. What's been the price trends recently? The commodities under pressure at the moment. But what about the longer-term trend of uranium prices?
It's very difficult to tell with the global debates on the nuclear industry generally. At the beginning of the year, when I wrote this paper on uranium mining in Africa, the price was $52 per pound, sorry. And now it's gone down to $50 per pound.
It's quite a small move, though. I mean,
it's a very small move. I wouldn't say that. I would say that the uranium price is stable at the moment, and in particular in Africa, it really won't affect the interest of mining uranium in Namibia, Malawi, Niger, or South Africa, because the commodity is accessible, the rock is accessible a lot more than, say, in Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan or Canada or Australia.
That's all for this edition of Africa This Week.